It is my very big honor to welcome you all to the Prime Dean's Dialogue here at the Global Forum. We actually had a Dean's Dialogue a little bit early on this morning when we had the Eastern Hemisphere session, where we were, because we're working with time zones here online, so we were trying to accommodate for the time zones, so we'd have our Indian and our Australian and our friends from that part of the world also to engage with us. And that was a very interesting dialogue. So I've been very much looking forward to this dialogue as well. And no doubt that in my inbox every day, and I am sure in your inbox even more, there's a lot of challenges of economic concerns, but also a lot of cultural, a lot of social, a lot of pedagogical, a lot of concerns for the future for business schools, for universities, and for higher education in general. So it is my true honor today to have such a high-level panel of deans here with me in the virtual space of things. I have here with me Sanjeev Khagram from Thunderbird in Arizona University. Welcome to you. I have here with me Nicola Kleyn from GIBS, South Africa. Warm welcome to you, Nicola. I have here with me Ignacio de la Vega from EGADE in Mexico. And welcome to you, Ignacio. And I have Chong-En from Tsinghua University in China joining us here today for this panel. So we have really covered a lot of the territory in the world, and I'm in particular, of course, curious also to understand the different perspectives, since we have Chinese perspective, a Mexican, a South Africa, and also US perspective here. Myself, I'm based in Copenhagen, so I hope I can bring some Scandinavian perspectives as well. We have sort of decided that I've invited all four of you to start off with some reflections on the current context and some of the responses from your schools and from your leadership as deans that you're taking right now. Sanjeev Khagram, please.
First, Mette, for your incredible leadership and this wonderful panel. I'm just so honored to be associated with these incredible deans around the world that are among the important leaders we have in our world today. For us at the Thunderbird School of Global Management, I appreciated that you said, with an American perspective, but for me personally, as someone obviously of Indian descent, but fourth generation Ugandan, expelled from Uganda by Idi Amin in the 1970s, I really do think of myself as a global citizen and a global leader to the extent that I can take that honor. And for us at the Thunderbird School, while we are based in the United States and now in the very, very intense high pandemic zone of Arizona, which now has rates as high as Brazil, we really think of ourselves as a global institution located in the United States. And that's a very important difference in that mental model. So just very briefly, prior to the pandemic, I took over the school about 2 years ago, and really the school has been devoted to a vision of sustainable and equitable prosperity worldwide. We refashioned our mission to really embrace the 21st century. Our magical triangle was really about global management, business skills, understanding international affairs and international economics, and culture and languages. Cross-cultural communication, languages, a second language was always critical to us. To that, we've added a major, major focus on global leadership management for the fourth industrial revolution, really embracing the technological transformations of AI, robotics, Internet of Things, so forth and so on. Undergirding that has always been a fundamental set of ethical and moral principles, our Thunderbird Oath of Honor. There are three critical principles in that Oath of Honor. One is we will respect the dignity and rights of all people. Two, that we will oppose all forms of corruption and exploitation. And three, we will advance sustainable and equitable prosperity worldwide. So not surprisingly, we are proud and honored members of PRME, Prime, because it's so aligned with our vision and mission. We really saw a world prior to the pandemic where the forces of exclusionary parochialism were on the ascendance. After 2 decades of globalism that was very beneficial for many people around the world, but with attendant environmental, social, and economic costs, we saw that around the world, whether that's, I will say in the United States, but in virtually every part of the world and across borders, that those who wanted to tear us apart rather than bring us together were on the ascendance. The pandemic, in our view, and then, you know, when you think about it now, it's sort of, you have, if I'll take a US perspective to add to the complement to this panel, you have a country on fire, obviously with the killing of George Floyd, but really the persistent racial injustice and institutionalized racism in the United States, which mirrors, sadly, persistent institutionalized isms of various kinds of different forms in different contexts all over the world. You have a world where you have conflicts and increasingly cross-border international, a decline of multilateralism, and increasing polarization of the world. And then you have a planet on fire. You know, 6 months ago, we were focusing our entire attention, at least I was, and I think many of us, on the Australian fires and what it signaled in terms of climate change. And then the pandemic hit. And in many ways, what the pandemic has done is just put that all into sharp relief. And so for our students, I think our roles as business school deans and business schools are threefold. One is to ensure their safety and health. We have to be the first and most prominent defenders, supporters, advocates of their physical health, but also the mental and emotional, psychological, if not spiritual health in these times. The world is really hard right now for all of us, and it's really hard for our students. The second is really to create the most educationally rich experiences possible with a fundamental ethical foundation. And that's our work with the Compact, and PRIME is so critical to us. And so everything we do in our programs is built on those foundations. But the third is to support them to know that they can be global leaders and managers that can make a huge difference in the world. And they can be forces for good despite the incredible challenges that are out there. And so that's really what we focused on. I will say for us as a global institution based in the United States, given what's happened around racial injustice and the unrests, I think the three things that were really important to us is that, you know, for our alums, we have 45,000 alums in 140 countries around the world. And, you know, there are many, many injustices happening in many parts of the world, and many are suffering as a result of the pandemic. So for us to say, because we're in the United States, we will prioritize something that we deeply care about. There's no question about it. And we will do everything we can to make a difference, and we have been, is a complicated thing. So our students here, our domestic students, of which are about third to a half, and of course, this is their society. And so they want the school, they want me to show leadership, and we do the best we can. But we have students from all over the world. And so we have to find a way to create a conversation that puts this into global perspective. And really, and I think this is where I'll end, because I want to really listen to my wonderful colleagues. Perhaps the most important thing for me is to put it in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Decade of Action. That what's happening in terms of the pandemic, what's happening in terms of Black Lives Matter in the United States, and one can go on, should be in the framework of the most comprehensive, progressive global agreement we've had in the history of humankind. And we as business schools, we as the private sector, must be champions and implementers and partners, SDG 17, in the advancement of the SDGs during this Decade of Action. So I'll stop there, and I hope that was okay.
No, thank you so much for these remarks, and you thank you very much. I will now pass on the word to Ignacio de la Vega, Dean at EGADE. Please.
Sure. Good morning. I hope most of you in the morning. For some of you will be good afternoon. A pleasure to be here, and thanks, Mette, for leadership in this amazing event. Let me give you some update on Mexico and the pandemic quickly. So we are, as in Arizona, in really deep trouble. Looks like we keep growing the number of infected people and dead people, and we don't see the light beyond us in terms of when is this going to start stabilizing. And of course, this is impacting everything we do in education, and also the life of a country, which I could say very deep social, economical, and financial perspective problems, and so on. I mean, let's not forget that in Mexico, we're talking about 130 million people. 50 of them are under the poverty ratio, according to the UN. and some 60% are in the informal economy. So they were the first losing their jobs after the pandemic. So really not seeing the light, but still looking with some optimism on how society is getting together to fight the pandemic and the effects. One of the things we see a big reaction in Mexico was the recent statement from United Nations condemning the George Floyd killing, and definitely from Tecnológico de Monterrey and EGADE, we're supporting and we're fighting any racial injustice that we see, not only in our geography, but around the world. We started some 10 years ago a program, Líderes del Mañana, Leaders from Tomorrow, which is exactly about making possible social inclusion of those with less possibilities to access higher education, quality higher education. It's a wonderful program. We've been graduating almost 400 kids now, and we have another 1,000 in the program that get 100% scholarship and full living and housing support from Tecnológico de Monterrey, thanks to a few thousand donors in the country and worldwide. So this is my first remark about pandemic, about social inclusion, and about condemning, of course, what's going on around the world. As Salvatore Quasimodo, a Nobel Prize Italian poet, mentioned recently, and the night came, and this is how we felt as the human race with the pandemic in March. And also it came in the possible situation with the worst leadership ever in our institutions. Let's leave it like there. So we're facing the impact of the pandemic where we were in terms of all the different problems and injustices that we were suffering as a world, and then the lack of true leaders. So what are we doing at EGADE? How are we facing EGADE and Tecnológico de Monterrey this pandemic? March 12th, we declared that we were closing the campus physically. Next day, we were online in EGADE for some 2,000 students in Mexico, Latin America, and other parts of the world. It took us 1 week to be online at undergraduate business school at Tecnológico Monterrey and the other schools. That is something like 90,000 students, 9,000 professors. It took us a week to put together all the technology and the training. And since then, I believe we've been, as Tecnológico Monterrey, as an institution, saving a few thousands of lives in Mexico. We're the first institution declaring the sort of isolation and social distancing, and most of the institutions follow. So this is a little bit where we started with the pandemic, and let me give you some more quickly background on what have we been doing in the last few years. Of course, besides joining Global Compact, we founding members, myself serve at the board in Mexico working with Prime. We created a Center for Conscious Business and Future Development, which gets together these conscious business ideas, stakeholder capitalism and others, but also adding sustainability issues, and this way covering most of the 17 SDGs. This has been working for the last, I would say, 7 years. This year we are sort of enhancing and putting more resources into the center, and starting to realize that as business schools, we need to, I wouldn't say apologize, but we need to recognize our role in how the world has been shaping up in the last few decades. And we might mention that coming from the Milton Friedman shareholder capitalism theories, followed by also the Vienna school, we've been sort of giving this signal to the market, this is a strong message to the market. The only thing that matters is the return of the stakeholders. And as business schools, this has been our positioning. Some of us started some years ago thinking about, is this all? Can we do something else about workers and suppliers and the planet? So bringing this triple bottom line, or the share value by Michael Porter, or more recently the Rashisodia ideas. This is what we're doing at the center, and this is where we are cooperating with institutions like yours, and hoping to also get together with colleagues like the ones here to add more value to this pending urgent revolution that needs to happen today. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, thank you very much, Ignacio, for these reflections from your part, from from Mexico that of course looks very different from other parts of the world, as we all do. And I would like to invite Chong-En from Tsinghua to the floor now. I'm looking very much forward to the Chinese perspective. In my work with the Lego Foundation, we have worked with creativity and play and learning with the Tsinghua University, some of your colleagues. So please, I'm looking forward to hear your reflections on the current context from a dean perspective.
Thank you very much. We see our responsibility as serving the role of 3 bridges, and the COVID-19 pandemic created challenges and opportunities for our role of serving as these 3 bridges. One of the first bridge is a bridge between China and the rest of the world. My school, the School of Economics and Management at Tsinghua University, is one of the more internationally oriented schools of economics and management in China. We have joint degree programs with many prominent overseas institutions. We have very intense exchange programs with a lot of our international partners. We also have this wonderful international board of advisors. And so we have been serving as a bridge between China and the rest of the world. However, this role is being challenged by the pandemic. Now it's extremely difficult for our students to go on the exchange programs. And there's a lot of challenge to our dual degree programs. And so, however, we are doing everything we can to maintain these exchange programs and dual degree programs. And we are also working very hard to create and to maintain our role as a forum for Chinese entrepreneurs and international entrepreneurs to exchange their views. And we think we have a unique position to do that. So although there are challenges, we'll keep doing it. The second bridge we are serving is the bridge between academia and the society. I think it's very important for us. During the height of the pandemic, many people are stranded at home, so you can view them as captive audience. I think also there is a lot of demand for information, for perspectives about how the pandemic will affect the society, will affect the economy. So in my school, a lot of my colleagues gave public lectures for free online to the public. And I think these lectures are very well received. In one case, when one lecture was given, there were 2 million viewers for the live event. Then on the next day, 4 million additional viewers viewed the recorded lecture. So this is, we are very proud of this role we play in helping the public understanding this crisis. At the same time, we also maintain the role of the bridge between academia and the corporate world. We have a lot of very high profile executive education students, executive ed students. I personally conducted about 10 online discussions with our students. And I think I'm very inspired by my conversations with these senior executives. Some of them are founders of companies, others are CEOs of companies. The phrase I remember the best is, don't let a crisis to be wasted. These corporate executives, what they told me is that they see this pandemic as an opportunity to test how well they can handle risks, handle crisis. So a lot of problems are exposed during the crisis, which they cannot see earlier. So they use this opportunity to focus on these exposed issues. And so they really utilize this opportunity. So I hope our future students can learn from these executives. So this is our bridge between the society and the academia. The third bridge is kind of special for my university, because my university is very strong in engineering. So we view our school as a bridge between management and engineering, with the technology playing a bigger and bigger role in the society and in the economy. I think this bridge is extremely important. So we put a lot of emphasis on educating our students, not only to know management, but also to learn some aspect of technology, so that they can serve as a contributor to the society. And this pandemic actually gave us a good opportunity, because online use of a lot of things are expedited by this pandemic. So this enables us to better serve our role as a bridge between management and engineering. So I see this pandemic as creating a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities for us.
Thank you very much, Chong-En, for these inspiring reflections from China and from the current context that you live in this very moment as a dean. So the last speaker on our panel here is Nicola Kleyn from GIBS, South Africa. Please, I will give the floor to you.
Thank you, Mette, and it's wonderful to be here. And it's, I think what is incredible is it's the first time that so many of us are going on the same journey at the same time. So often in our industries across the world, we see some industries leading and some industries lagging. And although, of course, our colleagues in China have had a head start in terms of managing this situation, it is remarkable and it's unprecedented. So perhaps a couple of observations. One of the things is, as Dean, it's become very clear to me that whilst I might be the custodian of responsible management education, the first and foremost stability is about responsible management. And so this question of what does responsible behavior look like now, I think Sanjeev has already alluded to. But the question around thinking about ourselves and our schools across our different communities, around what is going to work for students, where do our employees find themselves, and perhaps really, really importantly for us, what is our societal role? Perhaps just to share a little bit of background on the South African situation. If COVID-19 has brought anything, it really has unearthed the bones of the fragile system on which we sit. So prior to going into this situation, South Africa, as many of you will know, is marked by the country as probably the highest inequality in the world, substantial unemployment, at least 50% of youth unemployed in our country. If we look at widespread systemic poverty, there are, and of course, we have a history of injustice. And so when you come into a pandemic like this across this backdrop, I think what it does is it makes us realize just how critical our agendas are in terms of responsible management, because in a very, very short time, much that has been done as good and seen as progress has been undone. If we look at what COVID-19 has meant for a country under a severe lockdown, with implications of very, very limited growth and being plunged into a recession, we've gone backwards on so many of the SDGs. So this is really important, because what it shows us is when we see the system working wrong, this is what it looks like. So if anything, I think it serves as a propellant for acceleration of what it means to manage responsibly. And perhaps just to share a couple of things, I suppose, around the school's journey. So We have a sister faculty. Our purview as the Gordon Institute of Business Science is typically we work with business largely, postgraduate, post-experience students, a lot of executive education. And so we believe it's very, very important for a business school to play a convening role, to not shy away from having the tough discussions, and whether those are discussions around racism, inequality, unemployment, executive compensation, the role of business, the future of capital, and capitalism in an unequal society. We have to have those conversations, and we have to have brave conversations. What it does mean is we have to make sure that our own houses are in order, because it would be hypocritical to be having those conversations if we weren't having, worrying about them ourselves. But I think if I may reflect a little further back than when the pandemic started, I think there are a couple of learnings that we've had along the journey, and we're all on this journey together. Certainly for us as a school, I think we've moved beyond having to think about the principle of responsible management education and thinking deeply about, well, what does that look like in practice? How do we move from the espousal of a philosophy into action? I think we're having to move beyond the design and the development of curricula and getting faculty working together and critiquing each other's functional areas into thinking about how do we really ensure that our pedagogical approaches are inspiring to students, are engaging both of their intellect, of their behavior, and also of their emotional state. So I think that's been a significant shift. We have to, as I've already said, we have to move from what we preach to what we practice. And I think one of the provocations that I've been having with my colleagues is that I think we have to get harder about sounding out what does irresponsible look like. I think we're speaking a lot about what responsible looks like. I really think we have a role to play in trying to call and foster debate and discussion around irresponsible. I've been very struck in the conversations where I've been dipping in and out over the last day and a half, and it's been incredible. This question also around how we have multiple roles to play here. Yes, we are thinking about the leaders of the future, but I believe that business schools have a critical role to play in influencing leaders at the helm of organizations now. So it's not one or the other. We actually have to be having both. So, I mean, in short, Mette, from our side, I think what the situation going forward is going to take is the courage to really shine a spotlight on what has happened as COVID-19. It's going to call for us, and I think this is an American saying, that you have to walk and chew gum at the same time. So on one hand, we're having a discussion, and I'm sure all of my counterparts as deans are having this. On one hand, you're waking up and thinking about how do we manage online learning, but I'm also making sure that we're having a town hall where we're going to be discussing racism, which has a particularly strong meaning in our South African context. We cannot afford to only focus on today. We have to be able to focus and practice the complexity and the systemic systems thinking that we're preaching, to be able to think across multiple stakeholder groups, multiple time horizons, because that's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward and through this crisis. I'm going to stop there because I'm dying to hear some of the questions from the audience.
Yes. No, thank you so much, Nicola, for this input and sort of savvy comments about being unafraid of talking about the sometimes issues that are surfaced, that are non-surfaced and are more hidden, and actually bring them into play and into the debate. And of course, I would also, I'm just very, very cautious about time here. Unfortunately, we only have about 10 minutes left. But I would like to take another round with you, and some of the reflections and some of the questions that come in here is about. So it's wonderful that I have invited you, the four of you, magnificent deans, onto the stage here, and sort of in the choir here, enforcing, coming with different perspectives, yet towards the same agenda and on the same journey. But what about the rest out there? What about all those deans that are not really with us on this journey yet? How do we mobilize those deans to also, or energize them, or make them think this is the attractive way of going? That's one question. And another question is about pedagogy and content, because you have all sort of touched upon that we need a new content. And again, we know how difficult. I know how difficult I've been as a professor. Nobody is deciding what I'm teaching. It's my curriculum. I decide, more or less, what I bring into the classroom. So how do you as deans encourage another type of discussions in the classroom? How is it possible to do so? Is that by hiring, should we in business schools, for example, start thinking about hiring anthropologists, philosophers, literature professors, or other types of skills that we don't usually see operating in business school environment? Or how do we sort of encourage a broadening, widening, if you like, the curriculum to encapture these critical questions and challenges that you talk about, social, racial injustice, the post-COVID, all the other challenges, not least the climate change one. So if I can invite all of you, take the same turn, for a brief reflection on some of these questions that have been raised to this panel up there. Sanjeev.
Maybe, thank you so much, Mette. These are fantastic questions. And we are in, I want to just say to Nicola, I think you're right. This is an incredible, in the most positive way and most challenging way, grand experiment, because we're all doing this together. We're co-journeying together. And I think I just say three, I want to really learn from my fellow deans. One is that we in our, in the last 2 years have fundamentally transformed our curriculum, as you know, Mette. And so a sustainable business is now at the core of the curriculum. Every student has to take that fundamental class. And in terms of the broadening of the curriculum that you asked, sort of the last question, we created a program where of the 49 credits, 24 credits are electives. And students can do 1 or 2 concentrations, but they can take those courses at anywhere across the entire Arizona State University Knowledge Enterprise, any program, any school, any class. And so what we want, and we've encouraged our students, in fact, to at least for one of their 2 concentrations, design their own concentration, because that the customization, the independence, the entrepreneurialness, and them creating their future, taking sort of control of their own future, of course, with our support, advice, mentoring, and the rest. So that's a really big part of the way we've tried to advance the curriculum. I want to just, if I can, go back to one thing that Nicola and I think also Chong-En said, and I'm sure that Ignacio agrees. We do have an incredibly powerful responsibility about influencing, supporting, engaging current leaders, because we want to empower, of course, the future leaders, as Nicola said, but we have, the urgency is so overwhelming now that our responsibility has to be to today as well. But the nice thing, and I'm sure Nicola would agree, and my colleagues, is how we can bring current leaders together with our students. And I know we all do this, but there's a way in which the online digital environment has allowed us to engage, our incredible business leaders all around the world, engaging students, what might have taken in some sense, weeks or months or sometimes years to get them engaging with the students because we're not doing the digital world in the way we're doing now, we can do overnight. We've had 30 globinars with leading business people, governments, and so forth around the world in the last 3 months. We would have never done that many. And our students are engaging directly with them, our faculty, our alumni. So that's really phenomenal. The last thing I'd just say is that, how do I put this? I mean, I think that for us, we were luckily, because of being part of Arizona State University, you all know, number one, we've had a digital transformation underway for 15 years under our president, Michael Crow. But it's the continuing inventiveness of that. And I think, Mette, but we did this avatar robot ceremony for our graduation. And, we had to practice what we preached. How do we create a safe, healthy graduation ceremony that celebrates our students and their families and their friends when they can't come together. They can't be there to celebrate. And do it in a way that we practice what we preach about technologies can be a force for good if we are creative and ingenious and we use them for the benefit of all. And so this avatar robot graduation really was a very powerful signal to our students that even in the most difficult times, we can be resilient, adaptive, agile, and inventive, and it should be based on our core values. I guess the last example I'd make is that, we do, as many of my colleagues do, sort of global field experiences, projects and group projects and, practicums, because we all have advanced on the practical side of our educational responsibilities. Obviously, we couldn't send students out to the field and faculty out to the field. So we very quickly transformed into a virtual set of opportunities with our partners in the field who were very, very open to it. And what we found was three incredible outcomes. One was the students did phenomenally well and were incredibly adaptive and agile. Two, our partners learning about how to manage and work in a global virtual environment as we were in the same time. But three, going back to our students, they were so competitive in this very difficult employment market because they were future ready. They could actually walk right into a global virtual business environment or organizational environment and be successful. And so I just think that there is, despite all the challenges, which I completely agree, and they are fundamentally about inequities of multiple kinds, really tremendous opportunities that we're trying to embrace in this very, very complex world.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev. Ignacio, can I ask you just for a sort of concluding remark about some of the changes that you have encouraged in the pedagogy or in the content? Just comment on that before we conclude. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Try to be brief. We've been working in adapting our curriculum, our pedagogy, our contents, the way we deliver education for at least 5 years now. Going into the school 3 years ago, and we were really accelerating into this. And then COVID came, and this put us in 2030 in terms of the needs of transformation. I mean, my concern when I arrived to EGADE was that either we change and transform ourselves and start delivering serious value, or we will be irrelevant, period. So this is where I feel business schools are working on, and most of the colleagues are wonderful examples on that. But do we train people to become the best digital marketing expert or the best finance guy or the best strategist in a corporation? Yeah, we do, of course. But the change is we also need to train them for life. And if we really believe in what we do, and there were a couple of questions about philosophy and preaching and teaching and leading by example, we need to get into that. We changed our mission many years ago to work on transforming our students or transforming the world they suffer. I mean, we are the premier Mexican and Latin American business school and university, and we are sitting in the middle of injustice, poverty, lack of opportunities, gender issues, racism. Do we want to do something about it, or are we going to train the best technical experts? And this is how we've been transforming our skills, our methodologies, our pedagogies, even our technologies to include that. And I was mentioning before the start of a conscious business and sustainable future center to work on this. Today, 17,000 students have access to training, thought leadership, research produced in the field. Again, our responsibility is not to transform the societies, it's to train our students to transform the societies. And this is what we should be facing today. And COVID, again, accelerated this a few years. This is my personal feeling and how we're moving at the institution. Thank you.
No, thank you, Ignacio, for highlighting, that the role of schools to sort of encourage our students actually to engage with society, and that is a very important impact of business schools and on universities, which I think is, and I've said that before, which I think is simply underappreciated in how we promote faculty in our schools. Chong-En, can I also invite you for a very brief comment here towards the closure?
Okay, during this pandemic, we organized our students and alumni to help with people who are most affected by the pandemic. A lot of alumni made donations. They help organize the provision of protective gears for nurses, for doctors. So this is a very important part of our education. Also, we engage policymakers and business executives in our education a lot more now than before, and especially policymakers who are talking about a lot of the most important global issues, for example, climate change, inequality, etc. So we try to expose our students to a wider range of issues so that they can become more responsible leaders in the future.
So wider range of issues in terms of case studies or in terms of different types of disciplines?
Right. In terms of having more outside speakers come and lecturers come to teach from different perspectives, that's a general trend in our business education.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much for these comments. And Nicola?
Final comments. We're running out of time. I can see this, Mette. Yeah. I think a lot of this goes to the psychological contract that you set with your various stakeholders. So for us, we have at the heart of our vision, rather than our mission, is this concept of African prosperity. And that calls for an ability to be vulnerable. It calls for us as educators and as leaders to encourage a form of reflexivity that I don't think is always common in academia. I think we've come from positions of power. We've come from positions of the learned versus the learners. And when we say to our learners and our partners, hold us to account. Hold us to account for making these changes. We are not going to get it right. We are by no means going to be perfect. But if you're seeing that we're not practicing what we're preaching, if you are seeing inequity in the system, if you're seeing that what you are being taught is not consistent with the vision of African prosperity, you need to call it. So we need to give our stakeholders voice. And that's across all of those groups. The same thing in terms of for the business schools that are not in the room. Well, who are we partnering with? Who do we climb into bed with, metaphorically? And if we can't do this with integrity, if we cannot take those tough decisions, well, then we don't deserve to be putting ourselves up as driving forward these curricula. So this is not easy. But I think until we're willing to say things aren't perfect, but we have to get better, and how do we move forward, we are going to forever be that learned group that are going to not be future fit going forward. So I think that's the challenge that we all face. And if there's ever a time for us to be learning fast and moving fast, it's going to be now. There is no more time left for slow moving in terms of responsible management and in terms of responsible management education. The future has arrived.
I almost want to stop right there. That was a beautiful, beautiful one-liner to sort of end this fantastic panel. And thank you very much, Nicola. What can I say? Thank you very much to all four of you, Sanjeev, Nicola, Chong-En, and Ignacio. Thank you very much for spending this little moment with us here at the Prime Global Forum, and to talk a little bit about, because there's a lot going on, but talk about a little bit of those challenges and how you address those challenges as deans in your everyday professional life. Thank you for sharing that with us. And this has been recorded, so we can re-see this again if we like, and we can share it with our friends and our colleagues to also be inspired from. So thank you very much, and I hope we can continue this dialogue also in other spaces of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mette.
Thank you, Mette.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye, thank you.
And now I can sort of encourage all of you audiences out there in the world, wherever you are in your sofas, to join the different sessions. We have 3 concurrent breakout sessions happening right now. So please click which one of them in the sessions mode and join and engage at the session level. Thank you.